Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a little bit of a perspective from state animal health officials and hopefully give you a glimpse of what we deal with on a daily basis, where we've been in the past and where we see ourselves going in the future. Very good. So here's, I guess in a way, a rhetorical question, yet one that's real life in what we see occasionally with animal disease trace blacks. Which black heifer has TB? And many times I think most of us at one time or another get a cow with a position on the rail, and all they said is that it's a black cow. So starting off, having more information on the front side, I think we're finding ourselves in a much better position today than we were a few years ago. So what do we need for animal disease traceability? I think most of this is pretty straightforward. Premises, certificates of veterinary inspection, and not just for interstate movement, but we found out recently, and I'll illustrate this with not a cattle issue, but with horses, brand inspection information is exceedingly important. Industries that are vertically integrated, swine industry, poultry, that move lots and loads, I think there's less movement between the states than if you take cattle. The number of times when they go to livestock auction markets, and this was very true in our South Dakota, Colorado TB outbreak, we saw 140 some head of cows go to 30 different locations. So that's kind of how daily business goes. I think another thing that we don't think of, and we talk about a three-legged stool at times, but diagnostic testing and the information that we receive is exceedingly important, particularly with official ID. If we have official ID numbers in cattle, and we can have that as a sighting or an instance in time when a particular cow or heifer or beef animal is at a location, that test identifies that at that time. So when we begin to query information, it's amazing what we can find if we link up with our diagnostic labs. So y'all have seen this picture. We need to remind ourselves this is where we were not too many years ago. And whether it's paper or an image, it really doesn't make any difference. If you can't query information from a robust database, and if you don't, the key part, if you don't have people that know how to use it, I don't have to. I have people that work for me that are a lot smarter than I am in information technology that can do that. But it does take traceability from hours and weeks and months and puts it down to where we can query information and hopefully get information in a more real-time manner than what we did in the past. So I had shared this slide with a state animal health official colleague of mine, and this was taking information, and it is pretty simple. These are imports in January to Denver. Not a lot of livestock pass through Denver except for a few abattoirs that keep on living, but these are imports to the National Western Stock Show. State animal health official asked me, he said, so whether you can get this information immediately, and this is real data, you can go with this particular tool and hover over each of those dots, and I can pull up XML data and I can show you premises in the states of origin or destination. The point that he was making, he said, well, whether I can get that to you within a matter of minutes or whether I can get that to you in a day or two, why does it matter? It matters a lot with a highly contagious disease, so I hovered over his state and I said, okay, here's your producers. Do you have any events like that in your state that are national events? And they did. I think it was an eye-opener. So this is, I think, the bigger picture of electronic information and what it can do for us if we're dealing with a disease that's a highly contagious disease that moves fast as opposed to a disease like TB. So this is South Dakota, Colorado. We had one movement into the state directly from South Dakota. We also had some that passed through Wyoming. But this expresses the need of other information. In this case, this isn't information that we have in our databases, but we go to brands for brand inspections. We go to livestock auction markets, and a lot of this is boots on the ground, getting information animal by animal. And a lot of these cattle were in the summer, they're up on grass in the mountain, grazing allotments, and these guys don't have intent to bring them back, and neither did we, to bring them back to do inventories. But this picture, in essence, took 6 months to develop. That's just, some of that you can't change. Some of it's real life. That's how you have to go find information. So again, if you contrast what we're looking at to go through paper or whether we're putting cattle in chutes and reading ID tags, in 2015, Colorado received a number of cattle to a dairy that were directly from an infected dairy in Texas. And the cattle in question came in with health certificates from Global Vet Link, and they were RFID'd in 15 minutes. We knew who those trace cattle were within that herd. And we were able to follow them through a testing process, which is a whole other issue. A number of years later, and 40,000 caudal fold tests. That's 40,000 trips through the chute times 2. That's a lot of cattle. We need other answers, too, in the future with diagnostics. I hope we're not using the same TB test in 20 years that we're using today. It is not a tool that will help us eradicate that disease. So further in 2017, the TB trace with South Dakota, what are we using? News tags, brand records, paper CVIs, and again, that took 6 months. So the slow burn disease, that's the tools we have, but in a highly contagious disease in the future, we need better tools. So how did regulatory medicine work a number of years ago? If you look at our program diseases, brucellosis, TB, equine infectious anemia, and such. It was an individual animal of interest. You had a suspect cow that you had to go look, and Matt, this is what your dad did a number of years in Kansas, and it's animal by animal, and it worked for those diseases. You know, in large part, we've reduced the economic impact of those diseases. It'd be nice to eradicate them, but it is what it is. But how do we work with the systems we have today? And in the end, we need tools that work for livestock management and health, but also work for regulatory disease. And I think there's been a tremendous amount of advancement towards that end. So this is a little bit of a parallel issue, but I thought it was interesting. This is an equine infectious anemia investigation we're involved in here. We have a horse trader, horse dealer that moves horses to a number of people, and with some interesting tools. He has 4,500 Facebook followers. So on the left is a, excuse me, on the one side is the EIA official test document. It's on your left. I'm dyslexic. But at any rate, this is a new tool, and it's exciting. This shows an ID of a horse, and we had a number of these that, for whatever reason, this horse trader used these. He wasn't required. It's just part of his normal business. This was the horse we sent to another state. Life is stranger than fiction. This was the picture that she posted on the internet on your right, and that's when she did a GoFundMe page to pay for the horse. So you can't make this stuff up. But we found out later the pictures didn't match. We had the right horse on the Coggins test. She took a picture off the internet that this guy had sold because she wasn't really sure which horse she had because she hadn't received it yet. Good tools not always used appropriately. But this was the index case in the infected horse. And when I had a conversation, this horse had been shipped to Wyoming illegally without a certificate of veterinary inspection and on a pending test. Had a conversation with the buyer who never heard of me, didn't know what I did, and didn't understand why I was calling her, but questioned whether I had the right horse. And I said, well, the horse I'm looking at is a buckskin gelding with a sock on his right rear up to his fetlock, and if you look carefully on the back of that fetlock, there's a nice curl of hair. I pretty well ended that discussion. But in this case, whether this is data that comes to us through this document with a picture or whether it's a test chart that moves data, that's the key. And when we talk about diagnostics, if we're moving individual animal identification information, it can be extremely valuable in disease outbreaks. I saw this in reading Drovers one morning, and this caught my attention. And the comment was, producers do traceability every day. They have health papers, bill of sale, brand inspection, herd tags, lots, and loads, and that's part of the information that they have to do business. But I thought the quote beyond that was striking to me. Need to move beyond ear tags and talk about traceability in terms of accurate disease trace facts, effective record keeping, and efficient and affordable technology. And I think that's what many of the vendors that have helped put this meeting on, that's where they live. So I think this guy gets it. I think for a number of years we were telling producers that they needed to ID their cattle officially, and we've probably never connected quite on why. If there's a compelling reason to do it, that'll happen. I guess the thing that's encouraging now, if you look at EID use in the United States, significantly higher today than it was just a few short years ago with no mandatory requirements. So I think a lot of things are coming together in the right way. So in my mind, what hurdles remain? Again, further use of ID for management and for ID traceability and finding means to come together. I think there's a number of interesting projects that are going forth I think will reap a lot of benefit. Transitioning away from paper and pen and news tags, I think I'm very pleased with what Jack Shear had to say about today, about 2019. At least they wouldn't give the news tags away. They're a liability. They're cheap on the front side. They're 7 cents, and that was part of the pillar of traceability that Secretary Vilsack had, but they're expensive on the backside. If you want to read information in daily business and markets and such, and scraping manure off of tag to try to read an illegible number that we transcribe incorrectly 5% of the time. So that's not where future is. In time and in collaboration with producers, if official ID is required, either at the birthplace or at the first point of movement and tag retirement, would that help animal disease traceability? I think there's no question. And the last point here, images of electronic documents that don't move data save a big pen and a postage stamp, but they don't do anything to move data. Whether you're looking through piles of paper or you're skimming through documents that are on a screen, it's irrelevant. And having certificates of veterinary inspection, other test documents that move data, so we're not key punching information in, is incredibly important moving toward the future. I had this picture in my mind a number of years ago that I could come in my office one day, and as these MCVIs and different health certificates come into our database, that maybe it would be like feeling a water pipe and feeling kind of the hum of water rushing through a pipe, and that this data is automatically populating. Well, it's not quite that simple. You still have to have people that look at it and make sure that it's accurate. But the data standards work that's been done through the National Assembly Committee and Justin Smith helping in that regard was extremely arduous. It's amazing how complicated it can be just to get the data consistent in the different fields of a health certificate. But they've done that, and I think we're a long ways forward in being able to move that information efficiently between veterinarians in the field into our databases, and then in a way that we can respond to real-life disease events. So thank you.